evening. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us all this evening. Welcome to the people in the room and welcome to the people that are joining us online as well. Tonight, we're here to have a crucial discussion on the new Frontline Women, Media and Digital Trust. We are delighted to be here in Leeds and we send our sincere thanks to Channel 4 for hosting us this evening. At a time when media landscapes are rapidly evolving, it is more important than ever to bring these discussions out around the country and ensure that all of your voices can be heard as we try to shape the future of our journalism. So for those of you that are joining online and in person, we really appreciate your time and your commitment to this conversation. We're so grateful for our panellists to join us this evening. They bring their valuable expertise from the worlds of broadcast, publishing and digital media. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Sunita Bhatti. I am the head of regions for Channel 4 News. I work for ITN. I'm also the deputy chair of Women in Journalism, and I will be looking after you this evening, or I'll be doing my best at least. As a journalist and an advocate for media inclusivity, I've spent my career championing diverse voices in the industry. Tonight's discussion is particularly close to my heart as we address the pressing issues of misinformation, online safety and digital trust, key challenges faced by women in journalism today. We're hoping that this event will empower women journalists with practical strategies to safeguard their work and well-being, ensuring that they can continue to tell stories that really matter without fear or compromise. So let's dive into this really important conversation and I'll invite our panellists on the stage. We're really lucky to have them. So I'll start by welcoming Sophia Smith-Gaylor. She's an award-winning journalist and author known for her work in digital storytelling and engaging audiences on social media. We've also got Natalie Fahy with us. She's the editorial director for Reach for the East of England and London. She oversees brands like Nottinghamshire Live and My London. And my colleague, Darshna Soni, communities editor for Channel 4 News, with her focus on inclusive storytelling and engagement for diverse communities. So come and join me on stage, ladies. Thank you. So I'll start with questions and then we'll be able to take questions from the audience as well as those online as well. So I'm going to start with a question for all of you. Online abuse has become an unfortunate reality for women journalists. How have you personally navigated digital threats and what practical steps would you recommend for others facing similar challenges? Sophia, do you want to go first?
Hi everyone, it's really nice to be with you all tonight, online and offline. So in terms of threats that I have faced for my work, it's quite interesting comparing the different challenges that I've faced, whether I've been the face of a news organisation fronting digital content, or whether it's fronting my own work as an independent journalist / content creator. The experiences are frankly like chalk and cheese. I will get far more dehumanised and I will get far more threats if I'm fronting content for a news organisation than if I'm fronting content under my own name. However, I make an awful lot more content under my own name. Different challenges arise from me amplifying my work in that way and building a community around my reporting. So I have had everything from obviously nasty things being said online about me. I've been subjected to a raid from a particularly unpleasant website that I won't name, but you can probably guess which one. And similarly, I once got followed home when I was a very junior journalist at the BBC, not by someone who hated me, but rather the opposite, by someone who really liked my work, probably didn't even realise that was what they were doing. So in everything that I do, I always have, and we can discuss this, I won't go into it for this answer, but contingency plans and things to protect me. I want to end that, however, by saying that the vast majority of interactions that I have for my job, which are primarily online, because the work I do is so much like making video to go online, are positive. So I know we're having a conversation about risk mitigation, but overwhelmingly, my experience online is very positive.
Which is good to hear. Natalie?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to know your boundaries and know which spaces you feel safest in. So, for example, if you don't want to be on X and that's not a great place for you, you don't have to do it. And I think, you know, as a manager, as an editor, it's really important that we let people know you do you and what feels best for you. I'm really advocating LinkedIn as a place for people at the moment because it feels like quite a good, positive kind of space. People are supporting each other, so that's great. But also, I just have a really big rule that, you know, I don't respond to trolls. I don't respond to those nasty comments that people leave. And like you said, Sophia, most people are really supportive. If someone is really bugging me, I might reply and try and take them off that platform. Say, can you email me instead and we deal with it in private. But, you know, put your phone on silent after a certain time. You don't have to respond to all the notifications that are going on. And it's just important we sort of spread the word about that as managers and editors, I think.
Okay, Darshna?
Hi, good evening. I think I would agree with some of what you're saying about the fact that you don't have to go online. That's a really important thing to remember, is that you are in control. You have the power. You don't have to log on. You don't have to respond to the tweets or whatever it is. And there are now some really nice spaces, like Blue Sky is really nice. LinkedIn is really lovely. There are some great places. And there are some positives as well. You know, we can engage with the audience in a way that we couldn't before. It's so lovely now that people can get in touch with you directly. They can, because they will give you feedback. You might not agree with the feedback, but it's great that they'll interact with you and tell you what you think, or tell you what you missed about a story, or what you could look at next. And it's very different to when I first started. When I was, I started at the BBC and then I moved to ITN. And sometimes you would get letters in the post that would feel a little bit creepy. But you could sometimes laugh at them. You could show your colleagues. You could say, "Oh, this is a bit weird." There was a guy who used to send me gloves, which was really weird. I don't know what that was about.
Why?
It's very strange. But in a way that felt more manageable, because it came to your office. It was screened by everybody in security. They knew what was going on. You could show your editor. It's very different now. It's so much more personal. And I think, especially as a woman of colour, you have the added thing of the misogyny, the racism. You get a lot of racism. So it can feel very, very personal. So I think my approach to it is the same thing, where I just don't engage with the trolls. You just don't have to listen to them. You don't have to respond. There's absolutely no point. There's a really good example of something that happened to me when we were covering the Nottingham attacks. I used to get really trolled, very strange messages from somebody who used to always comment on what I was wearing, and he'd say all the time about the dresses that I was wearing, the nail varnish that I happened to be wearing. And a couple of women actually piled in and said to him, "What's your problem? It's absolutely irrelevant. What are you talking about?" And I found that was a really good strategy when women stuck together and actually helped one another. People I didn't know, but then became online friends, because they jumped in and said, "Listen, mate, this is not on." And actually, when they called him out, he stopped doing it. So I thought that was a really good tactic as well.
So finding those allies, perhaps in those online spaces, and not being in places where you might find it difficult in the first place.
Yeah, and as women, you know, like you said, we should be out there supporting other women, because then you can drown out those people who are talking you down. And, you know, I do try to do that within reason as well. You know, obviously I haven't got a million hands and hours to do it all, but if someone, a trainee reporter, is out there on Twitter or LinkedIn, I'll try and jump into the comments and just be like, yeah, this is great, and give them support, because hopefully we can drown out the misogynists and the trolls.
Because there is that tension, isn't there, with wanting to be on platforms so that you can amplify your work, but also protect your own mental health and well-being.
Yeah, that's a huge issue. And you can get, and it is very, very addictive, as you all know. You will do a story and you'll be buzzing from it, and you put it out and you want to check the comments. You want to see what people are saying. You want to see if anybody else has got any feedback or any further tips or anything, and you want to see how the story went down. But that can be really bad for your mental health as well. So I kind of learnt to make sure that I have really clear boundaries. Like when I get home, I will put my phone away. I'll try not to look at it. I'll try not to, you know, to make that the first thing I do when I get up. It's really difficult, but you do have to manage it, like you said, for your own mental health.
Yeah, and I am still on X, you know, even though it's become a horrible place, which makes me quite sad, because, you know, I think it's important we're on there to sort of counteract the stuff that is going on. If we can try and break through somehow, it's great.
Yeah.
And Sophia, like, your work is primarily in those spaces, so how do you manage that fine line between visibility and vulnerability in those spaces?
So I take advantage of features that the platforms have. And I also have a general rule. So just to explain briefly those kind of features, my Instagram experience transformed overnight. It was actually, I can't remember if it was following that raid that I mentioned or afterwards, or because I tweeted about it, and this was still when Twitter was old pre-Musk Twitter. I think Meta press team noticed it. That's the advantage we have as journalists, that if we ever moan up about companies, you know, we might actually hear from a human who works at one of them. And I got to speak directly with someone at Instagram who had a couple of suggestions, and one of them was using the limit feature. And I hadn't been aware of that prior to it, but I could limit who comments on my videos. And yeah, before I frankly thought it was a bit of a free-for-all that I didn't have much control over. Now, people can only comment on my Instagram videos if they follow me. And the ratio of positive to negative comments is transformed. Obviously, it doesn't stop everything coming through, but generally speaking, I don't mind negative comments if it's kind of criticizing. You know, I accept critical feedback. I'm not here not wanting that kind of rhetoric in my comments. I welcome that. It's the insults. You know, it's the hate and the insults that we don't want to see. And the limit feature has kind of done that for me on Instagram. I don't always like to praise platforms, but yeah, I kind of have to when it's due. There are lots of other things that they really don't get right. But then the general rule that I have with posting online, and I get this a lot when I do even coaching or training. I think an anxiety that people have before they platform their own work is, oh, but I'm really scared that all this personal information about me is going to be out there. Well, it's only going to be out there if you put it out there. Yeah. You have control over the information that you put about yourself online. So my followers know I had an operation last year, but they don't know what I had the operation for. They know that I'm getting married this year. They don't know where. They don't know any actual information about it. They know I live in London. They don't know where. You know, there is a lot of information that I have told them, but equally plenty that I haven't, and that I'm very protective over. I get probably a surprising amount of comments and DMs, especially. I tend to actually be, this doesn't tend to appear in comments, but it will in private messaging forums. So on like the Instagram question feature or in DMs, people being like, was that you at blah? So I know I'm perceived in public, which is terrifying when you're, I don't know, you've had a bad day and you're having a cheeky cry on the bus and you're there thinking, oh my God, I don't want to be perceived by anyone, never mind someone who recognizes me from the internet. But so many times people message me that and they're talking about where I live. You know, they're talking about possibly the road that I live on. And I never once reply to those people because
it's terrifying.
I'm not going to tell them yes or no. It'll be a mystery. So that's kind of how I manage that balance.
And how do you feel about that? Like, how do you personally cope with that? You just got used to it?
I do think I've gotten quite desensitized to it, yes. And up until this point, there's not been like, for example, that scenario where I got followed home, that didn't end up becoming anything. But obviously, there's always, you worry about the risk that one day it's the thing you hope won't become a thing that does, but nothing yet has actually aggrandized to become a like serious security threat for me that has meant I have to change anything about my online or offline behavior. So at the moment, I honestly don't really think about it much.
Okay, well, long may it stay that way.
Yes. The worst thing at the beginning was the massive amount of just sexualized content that I have to deal with. But I think I've gotten desensitized to that a bit as well, which I don't recommend as a way to deal with it all. But that is the reality of what happens.
I think when new people come into the industry, you kind of realise how desensitized you've become, because I feel a bit like that as well. And when you have the trainees and you're sort of dealing with them and talking to them about threats they're facing, and for me, it's been a different kind of mindset because, you know, I'm a millennial, just on the edge of being a millennial. And when you get younger people coming in, it's probably a bit surprising, a bit of a learning curve for me because I've been a journalist for 20 years now. And back in the day, it was always like, you've got to put up with this. You've got to have an iron skin and just crack on. And obviously, we don't want to be like that. And so, I've had to change, which is a good thing, and learn stuff. But this desensitisation is definitely a thing. Yeah, it's quite worrying in a way, isn't it? If you're getting sexualised content, I don't get that, but I'm lucky in that respect, I suppose.
I was going to say, Natalie, as a manager, how do you look after your staff when you know that there are challenging stories coming up?
Well, Rebecca Whittington is our online safety editor who's in the front row of the audience here. So we work very closely together. We're quite unique in the industry at Reach PLC that we have got someone like Rebecca. So when we have a difficult story coming up, we do a lot of planning, preparation. What are we going to do to make sure we can minimise the risks?
And I think we've got a slide to show actually some of the stories.
Yeah, so this one about Alex Belfield, he is a really vicious psycho stalker. And it's a shame that we couldn't get his mugshot up because he grins like something in your nightmares, basically, and he's always grinning. He never thought he did anything wrong. But he was sort of wrong, he thought he was wronged by the BBC, and he just sort of stalked everyone he came across. So we were worried with the reporter we were sending to cover the court case that she was going to be stalked and targeted as well. So we did a number of things to make sure she was going to be safe. We've got a special app called Everbridge. I don't know if people have heard of that, if anyone uses it, but you can like press a button and do a call to security straight away. Tracks where you are. It does like a safe passage, so it can see where you're walking, if you're out in a war zone or something. Nottingham Crown Court is not quite a war zone at the moment, but it can be used in all sorts of situations. And we just made sure that she knew if she was going to be promoting it on her social media, what kind of boundaries she could put in place to make sure that she wasn't getting trolled by all his followers. Because the way he worked is quite unique nowadays, I suppose. He wasn't like he was physically attacking people, I suppose, but he had such a big online following. It's almost cult-like. And people just couldn't see past what he was saying, couldn't see the truth. And he would just cause pile-ons, and that was how he would target people. So Rebecca, who was our court reporter, was quite scared about covering this case because she thought she would be subjected to a pile-on. But luckily, the steps we took to sort of protect her meant that she was okay. And obviously, he's in prison at the moment. But he's sort of speaking from prison now, which is very odd. And they did an AI-generated video of his face and the mouth moving and put it out on YouTube, which is obviously terrifying for the people he stalked, which included Jeremy Vine, by the way. So he's sort of speaking from prison, and that's kind of a unique new way of stalking in a way. You can still do it from behind bars. And when I tweeted about that story, I thought to myself, oh God, what's he going to do when he gets out of prison? But, I did it anyway, I suppose.
Yeah. God,
yeah.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
So, Darshna, last year, Channel 4 News' investigation into reform and some of its candidates, what you worked on, had such a big impact during the election campaign. We can play a clip of it now, and I'll just say that some of the language you hear might be offensive.
And we recorded extremely offensive language, including this canvasser saying people seeking asylum should be shot.
And so we won't play the bit where he says that, for all of our mental health. But in your work, how do you manage the pressure of delivering those sort of big investigations while ensuring that your mental health isn't compromised, particularly when, like that story, just ends up dominating the news agenda?
It was really interesting with that story because obviously Reform are a huge election story and everybody wants to cover it. We want to know who are Reform, what do they stand for, what are their policies. And they've got such a huge online presence. Not necessarily all Reform members, but people who say they support Reform or who pile in on any issue to do with anything that you're covering from a Reform perspective, and they will target you online. So as soon as we did that story, and I said that I try and switch off my phone, but I was just on my phone the whole night with that because the tweets started coming in, it got a massive, massive reaction. And we were getting so much hate from people who claimed to be Reform supporters. In the early hours of the morning, they started saying things like it was all fake, that was just some of it. I mean, there was so much racism, so many comments about reform being set up, about Channel 4 making up news, fake news. They very quickly mobilised, and they had their own hashtags about Channel 4 doing fake news and so on. So it was a massive, massive backlash. So we had to have huge discussions in the newsroom about how we handled that. Obviously, we didn't respond to any of it. We very robustly defended our journalism, because I think that is really important, because you can feel overwhelmed by it all, especially when it is trending online that Channel 4 is putting out fake news and people are asking you, oh, did you make that story up? People are saying that you paid the guy, this, that and the other. So you have to be very robust in defending your journalism and countering all of that. But then again, you have to find ways, as we've all been saying, of just switching off from all the negativity and not engaging with people who are just being racist or saying, you know, they agree with what he was saying about asylum seekers. You just have to drown all of that out and just focus on the facts. But you still have to do those stories. What I find really interesting is that there are some topics that people are not scared of, but they are wary of covering. So like you saying, you knew you were going to get stick over this guy. And it does make you hesitate, and you don't want to be in that position, because why should you? Why should you not be able to do your job? You are just doing your job. You're not doing anything wrong. But you do go into certain stories knowing you get a backlash. So I do cover a lot on asylum seekers, for example, and refugees. And there's not just the online pylon. You go out and people will be filming you doing your job. That's really common now. It's really, really common. So there are people who are against immigration, which is absolutely fine, and you're very happy to engage in a debate with them on it, and you know that there are legitimate concerns. But what they will do is they'll come and film you filming people, and they will live stream it, and they'll add their own commentary, or they will target immigration hotels, for example. So then you're immediately putting people in those hotels at risk, because they'll be saying online, this is where they're all staying, this is where they live. I've seen people where they come out and they kind of trick people who are seeking asylum into giving interviews. So they'll say, how are you doing, mate? Where are you from? And they won't realise that they're being recorded, and then they'll put that online. So that's another big hazard of the job now, as well as the online space. They'll come and film you and then put it online with their own commentary. And you know, I was in a town centre once, and I was speaking to some people who were holding a protest in favour of immigration, and Britain First were there, and they filmed me and edited it to make it look as if I was leading the protest or somehow involved in it. So you have to be really careful about all of that fake news as well. But there are mechanisms, there are things that you can do. So immediately we were able to get them to take that down because it was completely made up. So there are ways that you can manage it. And I think you do have to be robust, as I said, in defending your journalism and not letting them put you off, because there are topics that we do need to talk about and we do need to cover, and nobody should feel afraid to take those topics on, even if it is something controversial or contentious.
Can I chime in and also say that like newsrooms can do a really good job of making sure everyone has up-to-date digital security training and digital security in place. I've worked at two news organisations in my career, the BBC and Vice, and the differences in digital security preparation were deeply shocking. So when I was at the BBC, I was told to not tell anyone my password, and that was my digital security training. When I'm sure it's better. I'm sure things have improved. Remember, this is slightly old now. When I was at Vice, it was so extensive. There was a real understanding that pretty much any Vice reporter can go viral and probably will go viral. And it wasn't about if your work gets traction online. It was more, your work will get traction online, and here's what you need to do in advance. So, and it's a digital-first organisation, so it's sort of not surprising that they had that attitude. But this training was part of the, what's it called? Hostile environment training. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's got a special name. HEFAT.
That's what it's called, yeah.
It was part of our HEFAT, and I left that with a contingency plan. So alongside having learned how to do CPR and tourniquet someone, I'd learned the contingency plan. And I went home and I told my family what the contingency plan is, because they're in a digital security plan. The people who are closest to you are part of it, because their accounts can be vulnerable to people trying to attack them as well. So now, the closest people to me in my life know the contingency plan if I ever need to affect it. And I still don't think every newsroom is equipping journalists like that.
I mean, there's something we haven't mentioned like people who have kids as well. I don't know if either of you two have kids, but, you know, when I became an editor, that was another sort of boundary I put in place. And even on my own Facebook page, I was like, I'm not going to put photos of my kids on that anymore because people might get hold of it and use it in some way if they don't like what I've done. So, you know, that's a massive concern for people who are parents. How can you protect your children as well in your life? And, you know, I have to say to my dad is a massive Facebook checking in person as a pensioner. They all love it, don't they? Sorry, I've offended anyone, but he's always like, I'm going to check in that we're at this place together. I'm like, don't do that, Dad. I don't want everyone knowing where I am and where my kids are. So, yeah, we have to re-educate our families as well, I think, is what I'm saying there. What they can do to help us.
Now, if we can just go back to our slide, Natalie.
Yes.
We were talking about AI-generated content and the problems that it can cause. Do you want to talk through that?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about this one. This was a Birmingham story, so I'm very good friends with my colleague Graham Brown, who runs Birmingham Live. This has been a bit of a problem for him because I don't know if you heard about the sort of people that went into the hospital, Heartlands Hospital, and there was a big crowd of them just trying to protect their family member who'd been stabbed. So what actually happened, there was a load of misinformation put out about this on Twitter, and this picture started circulating. That's a fake AI-generated image. And because Elon Musk sort of gave it, you know, he amplified it, people started thinking that was true. It's a completely fake picture. And what happened on the other side of this is that Birmingham Live wrote a story saying what actually happened, you know, the truth behind all these rumours that are going around on the internet. And it took them a couple of days to do it. They did it properly. It was a really good story, squashing down all the scaremongering that was going on. And Heartlands Hospital wrote to them and said, thank you for doing that story. You know, it's great that you've got the truth out there. And then what happened from the police, and this is probably something we might want to throw out to the audience or discuss further, the police put out a statement saying, oh, no, that's not true. Don't believe what they've said. Not those words, but just kind of glossing over it and saying, it's not true, no one needs to worry about this. And so then the result of that was Birmingham Live got a Facebook penalty for putting out misinformation when it wasn't misinformation because Facebook had sort of sided with the police. So, you know, we want the police to work with us, not discredit our work and what we're doing. Very, very worrying. They've managed to appeal the penalty now, so it's all good for them in terms of that. But the police don't have our backs anymore, I find. You know, they're trying to push out their own narrative. Don't worry about the mainstream media. Don't believe what they say. We are, you know, Derbyshire Police actually used this phrase the other day. They said, we are the single point of truth, which is kind of a bit of a weird thing to say.
Which is what, yeah, I feel like you need to talk about that front page as well.
Yeah, so it's quite complicated. I'll try and explain it well, but we went to a briefing about the Nottingham attacks and they made us sign an NDA for stuff that should have been in the public domain. And so in the end, we decided to breach the NDA and publish the stuff that had been said in the briefing. But what was actually happening on the side of that was Nottinghamshire Police and the PCC, Police and Crime Commissioner, who was Caroline Henry at the time, they were all putting out statements saying, you know, they're lying, it's not an NDA, don't believe them. And Nottinghamshire Police took it to Ipso, saying we'd done inaccurate reporting, and Ipso found in our favour. So, you know, actually, we were right, but that's really worrying. You know, as a normal person on the street, you want to trust the police, don't you? But actually, what I've seen is that the police are just trying to discredit us, undermine us, say that we're putting out misinformation, and it's a really worrying new era. And I'm trying to work with the police to stop them doing that. You know, I'm on a number of working groups. I've been to see the police and speak to them, but I don't know where we go from here if people will naturally trust the police, I think, which is very worrying.
Well, sticking with that misinformation, Darshna, last year we saw after that terrible, tragic attack in Southport that quickly, you know, how quickly that misinformation spread and the trouble that followed in the rioting. When you're trying to report, particularly on those communities that have been affected, you know, in the aftermath of those riots, how do you ensure that, you know, you can maintain that inclusivity and authenticity in your reporting when everything feels so tricky politically and socially with all the sensitivities that are around it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And the role of the police in Southport was really interesting because you remember they got a lot of stick for the way they handled their comms. And it used to be back in the day, like you were saying, you would trust the police, whatever they told you about a particular investigation, you would believe them and you'd say, yeah, they're right. You would trust the media, you'd think, okay, they are telling us the truth. That's all completely changed now. Online, people are constantly questioning, obviously, the mainstream media, but also the police. They come in for a lot of stick. You get politicians. These are not just anonymous trolls as well. You get politicians coming out and saying the police are lying to us. What aren't they telling us? So it's a really tricky environment to operate in. So you do have to be really careful, especially when you're doing stories like Southport, which are so combustible, and rumours spread just like that. You know, we had some of our reports at the time when some of the riots were spreading, and there was an issue in Birmingham where a couple of young guys had heard that their mosque was going to be attacked, so they came out to defend their mosque. If you were walking by on the street and you saw that, you might have thought, what's going on? You would have seen a load of young Muslim guys, some of them in hoodies, hanging around on the street outside the mosque, the atmosphere. If you didn't know, you would have thought it was very tense. Actually, it was the opposite because they were coming out to defend the mosque in case people did come to attack it. But that got completely misinterpreted. And that was another example of where one of our, a couple of our news reports got mashed up by somebody who put it out, and he just edited it to make it look as if Muslim men were out on the prowl and they were there with balaclavas and knives and stuff outside the mosque. So again, you have to be really, really quick to rebut all of this stuff. You have to put out your stuff. You have to let people know. Sometimes it's about doing longer clips as well. And I know everyone's attention span, we keep being told, is really short nowadays. And on some videos, if people don't get past 10 seconds, they'll just scroll on. But you have to trust that people do want to know the truth. And you can treat them as adults and say, actually, watch the whole video, see what really happened. You have to do things like that. You have to challenge people's assumptions. I mean, as we've all been saying, it's not about shutting down debate. Nobody wants to shut down debate. You want to discuss things with people. You want to hear their concerns. You want to hear what their fears are. So, for example, I've done a lot on housing. I've interviewed people who say, you know, it's just not fair. Immigrants come in and they'll get a house. You have to listen to their concerns because that is a concern, especially if you've been on that housing list for years and years and years. You can't afford anywhere to live. You're relying on the council and you're just not moving up that housing list. But at the same time, you have a duty to say, well, actually, that isn't true. And an asylum seeker doesn't have a right to social housing. Even if you are granted asylum, a lot of councils now have rules about local, they have rules on your local connections, how long you've lived in the area. All of that thing goes towards your point. So if you're a single male man who's just got refugee status, you're way down at the bottom of the line. You're not getting a council house. So you have to point that out to people. And I always think not in an aggressive way, not in a patronising way, because people often don't know the facts. I've interviewed people before and pointed it out to them and they said, oh, actually, I never knew that. So it is about knowing the facts and sticking to the facts and being robust and always putting that at the heart of everything that you do.
Okay, well, yeah. Sophia, all of these challenges could be pushing women journalists offline, but you're working on something to encourage people to stay online.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us about it?
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm a big believer in not letting annoying people online stop me from being online or stop experts from being online. And it has come up a lot in work I've done when I wrote my first book, which was about debunking myths in sexual and reproductive health. I remember interviewing the woman who's responsible for some of the most preeminent research around sex education policy in the US. And she's very hard to find any information about online, and she does not amplify any of her work because of how much she has been attacked. So this is someone whose voice absolutely needs to be heard, especially under the current administration. But you won't hear her voice. You'll be lucky if you find her research, but you won't find any, you know, science communications about her work because she's too scared to amplify it. And I asked her, has she ever been given any digital security training? And she said no. So I actually see that as a direct, that's not only a direct result of the harassment she's received that she's so offline. She wasn't given any opportunity actually to be online in a safe way, and that's what's happened. So obviously I believe that we deserve to be able to, and we should amplify our work online, regardless of what industry we work in. It's when we talk about the work we're doing that it can impact more people, that it can change more lives, that we can make more money. I think it can solve a lot of problems. So I won the Georgina Henry Award this year for creating a tool called Sophina, because it's like a little Sophia in your pocket. That's the premise. And it's an AI-enabled tool. I've given it, its training data is me. Its training data are over 100 transcripts of successful videos that I've put out doing my factual explainer style. And whatever you write, you'd be able to put it into it's now an app that's being developed. You'd put it into the app, it would give you a script ready for you to record and hopefully create a piece of content that's ready to contend with an algorithm and perform well on an algorithm. That's the premise of it. And I know that when I launch it and the sort of system and array of resources that I hope to get funding for and build around that is digital security and contingency planning. Because if we're suddenly in a position where we're amplifying ourselves more online, we need to know how to do that in a way where you almost don't think about your safety because you've got the security in place. It becomes a bit like, generally speaking, how I live and make content day to day, which is I don't have to think about the security stuff so much because it's so hardwired into the processes of what I do that, you know, unless a new situation comes and I have to reconsider, it's by and large pretty safe. Yeah, so that's what I'm building.
That's very exciting.
Sounds
great.
Yeah.
Right, have we got any questions from our audience that's here with us in Leeds? There is a mic available if you do. There's someone here. We'll just get the mic to you if you just hang fire until Katie gets to you with the mic.
Hi, I'm Shola Adesina. I am a journalism graduate and a Channel 4 content creative. This morning, I saw, this is slightly different to what's been discussed, but I really wanted to ask you guys about this when I saw it this morning. So I was on Instagram and I saw Jamila Jamil was promoting her Substack, where she talks about kind of the destruction of Gaza and other stuff that she wants people to hear about. But she was in a really low-cut top and she was bouncing up and down, explaining that she had to do that to kind of fight the algorithm because she kind of felt that her stuff wasn't being seen. So I just wanted to ask, do you guys ever feel like the algorithm isn't your friend? And have you ever had to overcome that?
The algorithm isn't your friend.
So this is for the streaming audience. So the question is, what have you had to do to overcome that algorithm? And is the algorithm your friend or not? Go.
You were going to.
Yeah, you were saying.
Let me know. So it's a really interesting one because if I was ever Jamila Jamil's social media consultant, I'd probably be able to give her some tips on how to game the algorithm a little bit different to what she's doing. This is actually a technique. She's been making content like this for some time. So this may have been the first video that you saw this morning, but she's been doing it for some time. And even me and people who are far better than me at going viral, we can rely on a kind of formula, a recipe, that is more likely to guarantee a video's success, but it can never absolutely determine that a video will go viral. That is impossible, but that is also baked into algorithms. In order to keep us engaged, all the major platforms engage in deceptive design patterns. So they all engage in features that keep us on there for longer and longer. As a user, we see that in the infinite scroll. You know, there's always something interesting for me to see. But as a creator, we experience that instead with varying and fluctuating video performance that keeps us coming back because we can do one viral video and it's like, wow, that was great. Let me come back and do another one using the same formula. It should work, right? Why doesn't it work? There'll be a lot of factors in place for why it doesn't work. One of those will be it's baked into the system that not all your videos can ever go viral. They want you to kind of come back and try again for more. Otherwise, they're going to lose your interest as a creator.
I think it's also important to highlight news fatigue. Even Jamila Jamil will be getting news fatigue in her audience talking about Gaza and Palestine. Every newsroom has faced it. So there's that as well. So it's not factually correct, in my view, to entirely blame the algorithm. It's actually also audiences and their fatigue in important news stories. Yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, cutting through the algorithm, I'm a text-based person, so I can't really talk about video, but you spoke about it so well, so that's brilliant. But I am mainly based on X and LinkedIn, and I feel like to cut through the algorithm on X, I've had to start paying to subscribe, because I just want to kind of get the truth out there. And so I'm paying £9 a month now to get the blue tick and all the rest of it. And my team didn't really like that, and I was accused of funding Tommy Robinson, which I tried to explain to them, you know, I'm trying to actually be there and get through the algorithm, and my engagements did go up when I started subscribing. But, you know, it's really sad to hear that she felt she had to resort to that to cut through the algorithm. I mean, what are these platforms doing to us now? It's terrible, isn't it, really? You know.
Interesting. Any other questions in the room?
Hi, I think probably nearly everyone in this room has maybe been through a pile-on at some stage. I know eventually you kind of become desensitized to it, but aside from just switching off or deleting X or turning off your phone, have you got any tips with kind of dealing with that? Maybe just coming through the other side and still having the confidence to post things and believe in the things that you write about.
So just for the streaming, that question was any tips for dealing with pile-ons and coming out of it sort of successfully on the other side?
Yeah, it can be very scary, and it's good to have a real-life support network in place. So people who are there to say to you, no, what you've done is actually good journalism, it's the truth, you've got to ignore this. So, you know, I'm a big believer in the real-life support network. My partner's great, he's a scientist, and he doesn't use social media at all, which is really refreshing. So he's great to talk to, and I've got my kind of people I speak to at work, you know, people who are great for the moaning therapy or kind of wallowing if things are going on. So, yeah, I mean, I just kind of, like I said at the beginning, you've got to have your boundaries, you've got to make sure your phone is on silent in the evenings, not looking at it. Definitely easier said than done, obviously, but, you know, I think that's really important. Yeah, I probably am a bit desensitised to it, which is worrying. I don't know. It's difficult, isn't it? Yeah.
Really tricky.
Yeah.
I have a very different attitude to X or Twitter than you do, because it's so toxic on there now. You know, it has been for some time. But even before Musk, it was the platform I could guarantee I would get the greatest amount of toxicity. I noticed very early on that TikTok comments did not have this level of vitriol in them. Over time, a little bit of the Twitter vitriol has come on, has sort of infected TikTok, but it's never, ever totally mimicked it. And I have made the decision where I now barely post on X, but that's not only because I will expect more toxicity there. 100 likes on a Twitter post, if I'm lucky, means nothing compared to 100,000 views on Instagram or TikTok. Like, if my work has to be about engagement and reach, and I don't think I can do that really with X anymore. If I can only do it by paying them £9 a month, I'm not going to do it. So for me, I actually use the platforms as well, where I am probably avoiding quite the same pile-on rate than if I stayed on a platform like X. We mentioned Blue Sky and LinkedIn as being more positive spaces. Yeah. That will not last.
Ominous.
Sorry, that will not last. With every new platform, it always starts nicer because there are early adopters who are normally generally open-minded, hence why they're an early adopter. And the trolls will come, and nowhere is safe, unfortunately, from that.
I mean, LinkedIn's not new, though, is it? But I suppose it's got a new surge. Is that what you're sort of saying?
LinkedIn's got a new surge.
Yeah.
I do think LinkedIn is different and bolstered by its close connection with being a professional network. So you can't really muck about and insult people and even shitpost in the way that, you know,
At the moment.
that, I mean, there are some who are doing a really good job on the shitposting front, but like one I really enjoy, and that's not harming people. But I think because of that connection to your real world employment and a far greater emphasis actually on verification on LinkedIn and being an identifiable person, I think that's affected it. However, I promise you, when I go viral on LinkedIn, they turn up. The same nasty people turn up because I've gone viral, because my work is beginning to reach people who don't know who I am, who are far more likely to dehumanize me as a result because they just think she's a rando online. I'm going to say whatever I want. So they do turn up.
Sorry to hear that.
On that cheerful note,
I mean, I just wanted to add there, I work with a lot of young editors who are all female actually, and they're really struggling to get their voices heard and get their work out there, and they're doing really excellent work. And I'm like, you should amplify this in some way. And obviously I can't sell Twitter to them, you know, that's a bit of an acquired taste. But I'm trying to really sort of encourage them onto LinkedIn because it does feel like a bit of a more positive space at the moment. I know you had the ominous message about it's not going to last, but at the moment, quite good.
Along with Instagram, it's driving the most interactions online.
So enjoy it while it's nice.
So we're dabbling in LinkedIn and I'm encouraging them, and it's working well so far. And, you know, it's great to see people sort of getting out there because it does require a bit of a leap of faith if you've not really done it before.
And like we were saying, why shouldn't people amplify their work? Because I know I was talking to a couple of you guys before we started, and I know there are people here from the universities, and I would hate to think that as you go into your careers, you just don't engage online because you're just too scared or the pylons are putting you off. That would be awful. You should be proud of your work and you have a right to amplify it and you should be putting it out there. So yeah, don't be put off by this. Because as we've said, the vast majority of it is positive, so don't be put off by it.
Yeah, totally agree with that.
It's as much about audiences seeing your journalism as it is you getting your promotion.
Yes.
Amplifying your work is how bosses and your boss's boss and your future boss hear about you.
Yeah, building your own narrative. Yeah, it's a great point,
Yeah, and everybody wants to reach those younger, more diverse audiences, and that is where they are, and that's a really important thing to remember. I've got another question.
Hi, I'm just going to throw the cat among the pigeons here. You're talking about social media here. You're not talking about journalism. I feel as if, you know, I've worked in the media industry for nearly 30 years. I've grown up with the Kate Adys, the Christiane Amanpours. When they talk about something, you really feel that's the fact. What you're talking about here is amplifying your content. That's totally different to journalism. I have my 17-year-old daughter here. I want to be able to tell her, when you watch something on the BBC, a 13-year-old child in Gaza talking about his reality turns out to be the son of Hamas leader, ITN there. I feel really angry sitting here listening to you talking. You need to really get on board with the fact that, yes, people are angry, but we don't have a credible source anymore. Please talk about journalism, talk about facts, talk about credible, independent press that holds governments to account, not social media amplification of content. Yeah. I just wanted to make that point.
Can I come
Thank
in?
you.
Everyone wants to go. The content that we're talking about on social media is our journalism. So I'm not talking about doing a tweet about my feelings on a homeless person. I'm talking about the content is the journalism. So all I ever tweet about is our stories. And that is what we do at Channel 4 News. And we've got a fantastic team. Some of them are here. We've got someone from investigations, our online, our fact checkers. That is their job. So everything that we put out is journalism. And we are holding people to account. We are doing it online as well as traditionally when we broadcast the news. So actually, I'd completely disagree with you. So yesterday we were talking about, we had an online session, we were talking about all of the platforms that Channel 4 News puts its content out on. So we do use LinkedIn, we do use Instagram, we do use YouTube, we do use Facebook. They've all got different audiences. We are told for some of them, you know, like I was saying, if you don't tell your story in 10 seconds, people will switch off. Some of them say that they like video first, some of them like words first. What I was really impressed with there is everybody, all of our journalists here were all saying, we won't pander to any of that. So just because somebody's saying, oh no, people, if you don't get the story in 1 second, everyone's going to switch off. well, they can go elsewhere for that. What we do at Channel 4 News is we put out the whole story, we put out all of the facts, we check those facts, we have a very regular fact-checking session, and we put the content out in a Channel 4 News way, but we use social media, and we're really proud of that. So actually, it is about the journalism for us. The social media is just a way of amplifying that. We're not amplifying any old rubbish. It is our very, very robust journalism that we're amplifying.
I'm just interested to ask you a question back, if that's okay. So which media sources do you trust, and do you sort of go about verifying things in any way, and how do you do that? I'm just interested, as a, you know.
Right. So I personally, I've lived around the world. So when I lived in New York, I used to read the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal was amazing for reporting, but Wall Street Journal opinion was terrible. Sorry. So I lived in Japan, I lived in Berlin, I lived in different countries around the world. So I've seen state media in China, I've seen media around the world. I trust the BBC, and my heart sank last week when I saw a story in Gaza of the Hamas sons, you know. So I really, what I say to my daughter, my 17-year-old daughter, is I say to her, trust the source. Mm-hmm. The source is what's important here. You have wonderful independent journalists out there. As you say, the integrity of challenging that story with how you've been trained as a proper journalist. And I really want to see more of that. I don't want to see all of these, you know, opinion pieces on social media, on the platforms. People are taking that as fact. And I'm really worried that that's where people are getting their news and current affairs, from TikTok, from the platforms, and it's not independently verified. Mm. And that is what counts. What is fact is what counts.
Yeah, very difficult. I mean, I do think as media organisations, we should be doing more of sort of showing our workings in a way. And I don't know if that would help sort of increase your trust in stories. And we're trying to do some of that. And I think the BBC do it as well. So it's like explainers of how you got to the story, but also the reasoning why you're doing it and why you've chosen to publish it. And, you know, I've written a few first-person pieces like that myself. We went into the wards during COVID, and I knew there was going to be a backlash against that. So I wrote a piece saying why we'd done it and the precautions we'd taken to try and sort of minimise that. And I think if more journalists could do that, that would be quite helpful in increasing trust, because you get loud voices on social media platforms who are putting out misinformation and people just believe them, like you said. So it's a big issue. It's very complex.
And my work's certainly about trying to saturate these platforms with more journalism and more high quality work. But the assumption that my work may not be journalism is something that's followed my entire career, which won't surprise a lot of you sat here.
And actually, if people are using TikTok, like you said, for news, that's a fact. They are going there for news. So you have to put yourself out there. You have to put your stories on there, because that is where people are getting their stories from. You know, a lot of young kids now will say to you, they don't watch TV. They get everything online. So you have to be online. You have to be there. Mm.
But they think if it's a content creator, that equals journalism. That's not the case.
No, we know younger audiences are far more discerning when it comes to trusting content online than older audiences, so that's not true.
But again, you have that noise of content creators impersonating brilliant journalists like you.
I think more journalists need to saturate these platforms
exactly.
That there is
Exactly.
better information. Yeah.
Mm, yeah.
Do we have any other questions in the room? There's one there, and then we'll go to the stream.
Hi, my name's Ellie. I'm a PR consultant in Leeds. You were talking before about how important it is to have like the allyship of other women in the comments, kind of, you know, telling people when things are wrong and backing you up. I just want to know, kind of, from a professional sense, what we can do as like journalism adjacent professionals as women, what we can do in our job to safeguard you and work in a way that's kind of not putting people up for risk, and if there is anything that we can do to support that.
So for the stream, this is about what can PR professionals do to help journalists with putting out content and perhaps supporting it on social media as allies, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult because there's obviously got to be, it depends on the size of the pylon, I suppose, but there's obviously got to be a significant number of supporters in order to drown out something else that might be happening. But there's no reason why individuals can't start just popping up and, you know, even if it's just as simple as, oh, I really like this, or giving it a like, or a support thing on LinkedIn. I don't actually use Instagram because I got too addicted to the shopping, so I can't talk about that. So I had to uninstall it. But that would be what I'd say. I mean, I really like getting supportive comments, and I think a supportive comment really gives you a really good boost as well. Just one is great, you know.
I don't necessarily have an answer, but I have an example that might be interesting. So what you said earlier about how certain stories you can almost anticipate they will cause more vitriol than others. I know if I put out a video where I might be addressing anything connected to gender equality, I can tell you what would happen, which is platforms don't distinguish between positive or negative engagement. They just see engagement. So there are a lot of angry men online who really heavily engage with videos by journalists like me, because there'll be a lot that they want to have a moan about in terms of their disbelief that gender inequality exists. And so my video is shipped to them first because it's showing people, oh, we think you may like this because you like engaging with this video. It doesn't matter that they're then going to say loads of nasty things about it. And it's so interesting examples like that where I have gone to my Instagram stories and I basically alert my following to what's going on. I say that I'm being targeted. I'll say that I'm being targeted. And all of a sudden the flood begins of people, both in my DMs and in my comment section. And in the DMs, there will be lots of people who say, what? I can't believe that. I really like that video. And it's like, yes, you did really like it. You didn't comment it though. So if you look at the comments, it just looks like there are a lot of men who really hate the video. And it doesn't look like, to the casual viewer, that there are lots of women who liked it. It's really understudied in the sort of anthropology of the social media world, who comments what and how we behave online, and the very gendered reality of how we behave online. And I'll never forget, I was a really junior journalist. It was one of the first journalism conferences that I ever went to. And there was this fantastic presentation that was given by a US religion reporter. And she was giving the presentation, and she was showing all the comments of her article that she got, which was like a habitual article. You could tell most of the comments were men, but she had web analytics that actually showed the gender breakdown of who had read the story. More women than men read. So why did only men comment? And I can only speak anecdotally to my own online experience. I do generally think men feel a lot more confident commenting on stuff than women do. Yeah. And I can't tell you why. I don't have any robust data to give you to support it, just anecdotally what I see. So if you can ever comment, and it's safe for you to do so, and it's a positive experience for you to do so, you're probably going to be helping out the creator, especially if they're talking about something like gender equality.
It's that male confidence, isn't it? You know?
I don't know. I can hypothesize, because I
really
assume that. But there's something, I really want someone has to do it for their PhD or something.
Yes. Yeah.
I think we need to get some questions from the stream because we've got a lot of people watching online.
So one question that we had earlier was, what advice would you give to young women entering the industry who may be worried about online abuse and harassment?
So it's advice to young women joining the industry about online abuse and harassment.
Yeah. I work with a lot of young trainees, so I feel sort of able to answer this one. I think they need to be. So I do want them to go online and post their content and amplify, because I think it's really important for all the reasons you said tonight. But I think they need to probably approach it in the way that feels best for them, on the platform that's best for them. So sort of dip your toe in, approach it with caution. Perhaps speak to someone like Rebecca, who can advise you the best and safest way to do it and the way to protect yourself. And also get your real life support network in the newsroom ready so that we can all be there to, you know, big you up, retweet you, say this was great, or give you like the hand with the heart on LinkedIn, whatever that means.
I don't know what it means either.
I don't know, but it looks kind of cool, doesn't it? So we'll go with it. You know, I really want young women to have the confidence to go and do it, but it needs to be done in the right way. And it makes me so happy when I see the young trainees out there putting their content out. But it does require a lot more bravery than it used to. So we've got to be there for each other.
That sounds like a lovely team to work in. If you find yourself in a newsroom where your boss isn't like that and your team members aren't like that, or no one's bringing up training, demand it. Like, it's your right. Your newsroom's not keeping you safe if they're not helping you out, helping you answer that question.
The other thing that I would say is keep some perspective. So remember, online is online, but then come to an event like this, sign up to things like this, and actually get out there and getting a room full of people and talk to people in real life, which I think sometimes you can forget, or you can be sitting at home and think, you know, you just message somebody or you just watch online, or fair enough if you can't make it in, but come out to events like this, build networks, actually have real people that you can ring, that you can say to them, you know, I'm getting a bit of stick, have you got any advice, or I just feel like letting off steam with you and talking to you about it. But I think nothing beats the face-to-face, and sometimes you can forget that and you can live your whole life online, and you can get so anxious about a story that you've done or something that you put out and all the comments you're getting and everything. But actually, if you just get out in a room and you talk to somebody, you just get a completely different perspective on it. So I would say, join networks like this and get out and put yourself out there in real life as well.
Yeah, please join Women in Journalism. Shameless plug. Is there a question in the room?
Hello, I'm a student from Leeds University. So I'm so happy to hear from you guys because we can learn a lot from the brilliant women here today. So the topic is about me in journalism. So I have a few questions similar like the online question. So when I want to choose journalism as my major, so a lot of people told me that you do better don't do journalism, especially girls. So I heard a lot of experience from you today, like online attack, something abusing something else. So how did you pursue yourself to keep on doing journalism? I want to hear you, like, when you face some difficulties, and how did you cover yourself, and how did you face that? Yeah, I want to learn from this.
So for the stream, it's a question about resilience, essentially, isn't it? Sort of like how do you keep going in the face of challenges?
So I think I've said this quite a few times now, but the real life support network is very important, and having people who aren't journalists as well, who can offer that kind of perspective on things. You know, I think I've talked about my partner quite a lot. He's very down to earth and realistic about things, and you know, if you've got kids, they're a real grounder as well, aren't they? Because they will give you a massive perspective on something that is completely irrelevant, which I like. You know, where's my felt tip pen or whatever. So that's how I kind of keep my perspective. It's obviously not what everyone does. You know, make sure the phone's on silent, as I've said as well, and just take time to like really look after yourself. You know, for me, that's just like getting into my pajamas and lying on the sofa, basically, and that helps my resilience, because then having a rest and switching off from stuff can be very difficult to switch off, but you have to try somehow, whatever works for you.
Two things. It's why when I answered the first question, I wanted to emphasise that most of my interactions online are positive. So we have to remember when we risk mitigate to also speak about the positives and not make that feel like it's the biggest part of my life, because it's not. The second thing, however, is if I think about my career and where I've had to build resilience, I honestly don't really think, obviously a part of that has been online interactions and what's been the main subject of today, but I've had to build a lot more resilience for attitudes I've encountered within the newsroom, not outside of it. That has been some of the most challenging part of my work. And thinking about it a lot this week. I was in possibly one of the most important rooms I've ever been in, and someone, a very, very senior person in journalism, looked at me and essentially assumed I was the coffee girl. They didn't think I was a journalist in the room. I'm having to deal with issues like that. I'm having to deal with senior bosses not thinking that my work is valid journalism. So I've actually had to be put in a position where I have to really advocate for myself in important spaces. And ultimately, if I don't advocate for myself or champion my work, who else will? You've got to be your biggest cheerleader. And the minute you have you backing you, then you find your people. You find the other people, the real life people who are going to support you. And that is how you can begin to craft resilience. Real life, nothing beats real life support. But before real life support, you need you.
Because if you face something online which is terrible, could you against them just because? So we are journalists, but basically we are human. So can we beat again, or?
But I would say to you, don't let that put you off, because as we've said, you don't have to go online. You are in control of it. I know some really great journalists at Channel 4 News who don't really have an online presence. They just don't do it. And their work speaks for themselves. So you have to remember why you're doing journalism. It is such a fantastic career. I think it would be such a shame if you let it put you off. I really do. It is such a rewarding career. And it is fantastic, and the opportunities are fantastic. And you do hold power to account. And you have to remember your reasons for doing it. You're not doing it for any of the online trollers. You're not doing it for their benefit. You're not there to interact with them or to listen to them or let them put you down. You're doing it for telling those stories and giving people a voice. And I think you have to remember that and the reasons why you want to do it. There are loads of careers where people get stick. I've got a very good friend who's the deputy head of a school, and the amount of stick she gets, not from the children, but from the children's parents. She gets so many pushy mums all the time harassing her. That is a really difficult job. I couldn't do that. So whatever job you go into, you're going to have these problems. But remember the reasons why you're doing it. Don't let that put you off a career in journalism. Really don't. Tonight, for example, Channel 4 News are at the RTS Awards. We've been nominated in so many categories for the work that we've done on investigating the Church of England and the sexual abuse scandals. And that was incredible journalism, and we've been dedicated to that for years. And we are getting recognised for that today, hopefully, at these awards. And that's the reason that we're in this. So keep that in focus, I would say to you, as somebody starting out.
And that's a great way to end our discussion this evening. Thank you so much to the panellists for your wise words. I hope that people have taken away some top tips. I will be thinking about my digital contingency plan this evening, and the training that you can put in place for colleagues to better support them. Some really great advice there. Thank you for everyone in the room and everyone watching online. We're really grateful for you giving up your time. Thank you to Channel 4 for hosting us this evening. And please join Women in Journalism so that we can have more events like this. Thank you very much, everyone.